Hi, it's Chris with Implied Music. Listen, we've been looking at melody in detail the past 6 weeks. And today I'm going to take it in a slightly different direction because instead of narrative melody, instead of something that you might be able to sing, I want to look at a very simple idea of what a melody is, one note at a time. And I guess what I would say is we're going to look at sequences, arpeggios, strings of sixteenths, eighteenths, patterns that create a sense of scale or sonority, what I call terrain. It's a kind of a harmony, but it's only one note at a time. But if you mash the pedal down or use a long release time, you get a lot of notes at once. My teacher used to call it pan-diatonic harmony, all the notes from a diatonic scale. Well, I've got 6 short examples of that. Let's listen to these. I love this effect. Well, if this is the second or third video of mine that you've seen and you're getting something out of the channel, and you're not subscribed, I'm going to encourage you to subscribe because what we're trying to do here is build a community of producers and composers, musicians who want to use music theory not in an academic way, but in a way that furthers their own interests, kind of a get it done sort of attitude. And I hope this is a kind of a music theory for everyone. It is sort of, in a way, my music theory. And what my teacher, Dr. Roland Wiggins, used to say to me, and I'm going to say to you, is you must become your own theorist. If you want to find a voice, a musical voice that's your own, understand what you like and what you don't like, how to do what you want to do, and then get it done. And the best way I know to do that is to make a little list of things you like and things you don't like, put aside the things that you don't want to have anything to do with, and support the stuff that you do. Well, one thing that I love is this idea. I'll show you what I mean. I think of it as a terrain, or, you can think of it as just like a scale, I suppose. But here's a easy version of the C pentatonic scale. It says A minor 7 here. But as you know, these 5 notes are the C pentatonic scale. And if I just kind of like make a pattern with those notes, I'll get a sense of harmony. Well, here, this is what I've done with this ascending and descending pattern there. Now, that's kind of enough for me. Maybe there's a melody over the top. But what happens here is what makes me excited. So what just happened? Well, I kept kind of all of the same notes, except I changed the spelling, the value, if you will, of some of those notes in order to get into a new key. I raised, and you can take a look at it here on the screen, the G to G sharp and the C to C sharp. Now, when I did that, I actually sort of, because there's no F in this, I happen to know that if I add up all of those notes, and there's a D, sorry. I'm in the key of A. I went from the sort of key of C to the key of A. And that sound, it really is kind of a modal modulation by thirds, or a mediant, modal mediant. Here we go. Is a bright, sort of epic sound, isn't it? And then we can continue to do that into a new key. It's A flat major in my mind. And then back to C. Interesting, right? If I was creating a new melody over the top of this, something expressive, I'd have to be very careful about what scale I was in. What a gorgeous sound that is, right? And you can allow yourself to experiment with this stuff freely as well. You don't actually have to know the names of all your scales and stuff. You can just go for a sound. Grab a sound you like. Alter a couple of pitches. If you're consistent, you'll get something interesting. Each of these patterns has its own integrity, its own identity, its own instrumental form. I use the word instrumental form to describe a pattern. And you can actually see in my second example the sort of visual of that instrumental form. You can see it's kind of a, whoa, what direction should we go? Should we go this way? Yeah, like it's a diverging or contrary motion melody. And it really is, when you get right down to it, something pretty simple, a couple of chords that interlock. I guess we could think of it as a couple of seventh chords, right? In my left hand, the E flat major 7, and in my right, the G minor 7. Altogether, a very strong E flat major sound, and I'm just going left, right, left, right, left, right, left, right. Left, right, left, right, left, right, left, right. Sounds like this. And then a little faster. And we're going to use the same approach. Alter notes just by a half step to get a new scale. What holds it together is the pattern, the instrumental form. What gives it color is the shifts of scale. Is this a melody? Not really. It's a sequence. It's awful pretty though, isn't it? It's kind of a pentatonic sound of specific scale. In the old days, back when we worked in electronic music studios that were just analog, and each note happened you had a synthesizer or an oscillator that could play one voice. We'd create these kinds of textures using a fast sequence of voltages, each voltage being a pitch. And you could create an effect of a chord or of a chord sequence using this fast sequence. It was a fairly common thing. In our modern DAWs, we have tools like arpeggiators or sometimes even sequencers built in that will give us this same effect. And I like the idea of being able to perform it as well. I've worked kind of hard to be able to perform funny stuff like this because I'm very interested in it. But it doesn't always have to be funny. My next example is kind of like an easy chord progression. Kind of a riffing chord progression or a sort of a song progression. It goes by pretty fast. So is it a progression or is it a riff? I don't know. But take a look at what it is. There's the D in the bass with an F and an A. Clearly a D minor chord, right? The next thing that happens is this, which is an inverted C, and then up to F. So it's pretty simple. D minor, C, F, and then another version of the C chord, an inverted version of the C chord that goes down. And I kind of like the sound of this. But if I'm going to play it one note at a time, I've got to break it up. So here's my breakup. It's got a little rhythmic hiccup in it that I just love. I think this belongs in a song somewhere. But I wanted to create just one change. So now we're up to E flat, just for one pattern and then back down to where we were. Is this a melody? Definitely not. It's more of a riff. But are riffs melodies? Maybe they are. I'll leave that up to you. In fact, I want to know, what do you think? Are riffs melodies? You know, is the riff from Smoke on the Water a melody? Maybe. The riff that opens the, Layla, is that a melody? The Satisfaction riff on guitar, is that a melody? I think it might be. Maybe it's a riff. I don't know. In Baroque music, there's an instrumental form that's so much fun. You take a scale, repeat one note, and alternate down the scale in the other. In counterpoint, this is called oblique motion, where one voice moves and the other one sort of stays put. It's a great sound. Let's do the same thing from the bottom up. It's kind of a Bach quality, doesn't it? As we change the scales, we get different, energies. And this sounds really cool fast on organ in a giant cathedral. Imagine the reverb time in a big cathedral. You're playing organ, you're playing a fast pattern like this, right? Those notes hang in the air maybe for 6, 7 seconds. Enough time so that you build up this sonority, which is the entire scale. So here's just a classic implied music interlocking hands pattern. We've got just a very simple C major 7, and then over the top, D minor 7. And if you put all those notes together, it's just, the C major scale, right? But what I've done is I've created this effect where I'm going B, and which is the 7th of the chord, and then C, which is the 7th of that chord, and then kind of just drumming down it, right? And that gives me my shape. Yeah, you just heard the chord, so let's hear what that's like. Each hand has 4 notes, so it's not an interference of periodicity. As I change the scale, as I change the color, I get a different texture, a different terrain. I'm not sure this holds up by itself, but it's a great backing track type texture. And it's also really an interesting thing to try with the hands, technically. The hands are really jammed together. It's hard. And that's a very good example of pandiatonic harmony. All of the notes of the scale are present, almost all the time. Very quickly, we hear all of them. Here's our last example for the day. And I think of these kinds of things as figured arpeggios, and you'll see what I mean. So here in the left hand, we have a simple E minor 7, but the right hand picks that up and actually plays the first 5 notes of the E minor scale, and we combine them to get this effect, which is a beautiful sound. Lower sustained tones, like if I did this, actually it doesn't sound horrible, but it's kind of muddy down there, isn't it? So what I want is opener voicings at the bottom and closer voicings at the top, right? And that gives me it's almost like the harmonic series, isn't it? The way the first harmonic is an octave, and then after that the 5th, and then things get tighter and tighter together as you go. Well, here's the effect of this. And I've actually figured this arpeggio by adding a couple of repetitions at the top to get different lengths in my arpeggio. It's a Philip Glass technique, and it's a great minimalist technique. And it creates this sense of propulsion and change. Of course, you can, change the scale as well, which I'm doing here. It's a nice effect. If I were offsetting this with a steady, regular arpeggio, the two things would drift out of phase and then back in together. Major to end. Well, is it a melody or a riff? I guess that's a question of aesthetics at some level, right? I think we started talking about melody with the idea that it's a way to tell a story, a way to express complicated, nonverbal, narrative ideas, that melodies have structure that relate to, verbal structures as well, questions and answers, periods, high points, low points. But riffs are also a kind of melody, only one note happening at a time. And they have a real place in modern music, especially minimalism and rock and, in contemporary music as well. Backing tracks use one note at a time, parts constantly in contemporary pop music. And you don't have to go far back in, European music history to find it as well. Baroque music and the idea of polyphony is really just many melodies, and some of those melodies are dead boring. I can tell you that right now after singing tenor parts. So listen, I hope this is interesting. As I asked at the beginning, if you're not subscribed to the channel, now's the time to do it. Like this video and leave me a comment. I'm curious to know how you use this kind of thing in your own work. Well, I hope this has been useful. I'll see you next time.